you, Heather. Before I introduce our next speaker, I hope you could indulge me with a bit of my own personal story here, because I'm originally from Toronto, but when I went to medical school at Dalhousie University. And the reason I went out there is, if anyone hasn't been to Nova Scotia, it is probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. I met my wife there. We have a family that we go back and visit all the time. I decided I wanted to stay in Toronto for my career, largely because I had really fallen in love with the sickle cell patients themselves, who I had come to know in the clinic, and wanted to stay there with them. And for me, therefore, there's a real special symbolism that the person who largely made this day happen, the person who helped us establish June 19th as National Sickle Cell Disease Day in Canada, is Senator Jane Cordy from Nova Scotia. And it is, I find it very personally moving that she came here to help speak to us today, to help us recognize this day. And I'm really looking forward to hearing her remarks. Senator.
Thank you very much. And Nova Scotia is a beautiful place to live, and there's definitely a Nova Scotia connection with the sickle cell community. I am absolutely thrilled, over the moon, all of those descriptors that you could use to be here today to celebrate with the sickle cell community, the sickle cell family. I've met so many of you at various events, and I just feel so welcomed every time I meet somebody new, every time somebody tells me their story. It touches my heart. I was thrilled to be at the Sickle Cell Hope Gala last week with my husband, and he apologized because he couldn't come here today because he had an appointment that he had made weeks ago and he wasn't able to change it, because he's feeling, as I do, that it just becomes a family. And when I attend these events and when I hear the stories, it gives me a sense of what it must be like to live with sickle cell, either directly, either people who have it, or family members, or neighbors, or friends who have sickle cell. And I have to acknowledge also the medical community. They're there every day, and they're providing comfort. It's one thing, as Dr. Pendergrass said, it's one thing to treat the illness, it's another thing to treat the person and the families, and Dr. Pendergrass certainly knows how to do that. And last year I had the opportunity to visit the Toronto Hospital Sickle Cell and Thalassemia Clinic, and it was a privilege to meet Dr. Pendergrass, and that's when he told me he had graduated from Dalhousie University, and his wife is from Nova Scotia, and I got the opportunity to see the incredible work that they're doing. As Laura said earlier, it was 5 years ago when Kirsty Duncan, Minister Duncan, I guess I should be saying, set up a breakfast on Parliament Hill, and where Laura and I got to meet for the first time. And at that meeting, I got to meet courageous and brave people who came to Ottawa to tell their stories to the MPs and senators on Parliament Hill. And they told us how it affected them and how it affected their loved ones. And those stories touched my heart as well. I'm skipping through things that Laura already told you. I really am thankful too for all of the senators and the MPs who supported Darren and I when we went through this journey of bringing S. If it starts with an S, it started in the Senate. If it starts with a C, it started in the House of Commons. So it was an S bill because it did start in the Senate. Through our journey on Parliament Hill. And I have to say, the bill passed with unanimous consent in both the Senate and in the House of Commons. And everybody who spoke positively about something has to be done. And when I was listening, and when they were speaking on second and third reading in the House of Commons, I went over and sat in the gallery and I listened to them, and so many of them stood up and said, I was asked by my party to be the critic, which just means responsible. It doesn't mean that you're a critic in this case. To be the critic for this bill and to speak on behalf of my party, and I didn't know anything about it. So they researched and they found out about it. And that's gaining awareness. And to have so many people speaking about sickle cell on Parliament Hill, when it was just a little over 20 years ago when Jean Augustine spoke, and people had no idea what she was talking about. Darren wanted to be here today, and he has votes, and they wouldn't let him go. And I said, well, you're much kinder. You just asked your whip if you could go. I just told my whip that I was going. It was inspiring, as I said earlier, to listen to people like Selena Cesar Chavez, who has the sickle cell trait, and who stood up, and I'm sure that was the very first time somebody stood in Parliament and said, I have the sickle cell trait. And to just tell people about it. Another MP worked as a nurse in Senegal and treated people with sickle cell. And Darren Fisher himself had not known anything about sickle cell until he talked to Rugi Jala, the president of the Nova Scotia Sickle Cell Association. And Rugi came to him on one of the advocacy days on Parliament Hill, and she said, you know, I want to talk to you, Darren. You're my MP, and I want to talk to you about sickle cell. And she started explaining it, and she said, and I want you to support Senator Cordy's bill. He said, Senator Cordy's bill? Of course I'll support it. And as I told people last week at the gala, normally when you start a bill in the Senate, and you're sort of begging and groveling people in the House of Commons to take your bill, to sponsor it, because it's got to pass both the House of Commons and the Senate. In this case, Darren luckily was the first person to phone my office because he's my MP also, and it would have been hard to tell him, no, I'm sorry. But 5 MPs actually phoned my office to say, when the bill passes in the Senate, I want to sponsor it in the House of Commons, which was pretty amazing. And as I said earlier, on December 12th, 2017, this bill received royal assent. I was pretty proud to be sitting in my seat and listening to our bill, as I call it, our bill, because without you there would not have been a bill. That our bill had received royal assent, and it is now the law in the great country of Canada. And here we are today celebrating the first National Sickle Cell Awareness Day, and we are all here to celebrate. And so in 20 years' time, they're looking back and they'll be saying, well, they didn't really know that much about sickle cell, because changes are happening very quickly. And I want to recognize the volunteers, the people who are here today, who've been instrumental in the passing of this bill. And it is because of you that this day is happening. Because of you and all the volunteers, all of the advocates, those who came to Parliament Hill, those who speak to their medical professionals and tell their stories, about themselves and their families. Lonra was the person who introduced me to the sickle cell community, and the work she has done is absolutely impressive in advocating for those with sickle cell in Canada, firstly in Ontario, on Parliament Hill, but across the country. I'd like to congratulate Biba Tinga, who's the new president of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada. And just yesterday, we had a fun day in Ottawa celebrating, I guess it was Sickle Cell Awareness Day Eve. Is that what you would call it? And Lonra was there. Jenny Gums was there, Mr. McCauley was there, and there were a number of MPs and senators who were there to celebrate the coming Sickle Cell Awareness Day. I mentioned earlier Rugi Jala, I keep saying gala, maybe because today I feel like it's a gala. Rugi Jala, the president of the Sickle Cell Association of Nova Scotia. And we're small in Nova Scotia, but powerful, and they've been having a number of events in Nova Scotia. And it was Rugi who introduced me to the community, the sickle cell community in the Halifax-Dartmouth area, who are affected by this disease, and it provided me another insight into the realities. This isn't just happening in Ontario, this is happening in smaller provinces like Nova Scotia. And as a result of the advocacy efforts by Rugi and the Nova Scotia Sickle Cell Association, Nova Scotia was the first province to officially recognize World Sickle Cell Day. So I'm very proud of my province for doing that. And Nova Scotia is also one of the provinces, along with Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Yukon, and Nunavut, to have newborn screening. And there's no reason why we don't have newborn screening across the country. There is no reason. Newborns get blood tests done anyway. It's just another speck of blood that will be used to determine whether or not somebody has sickle cell. I want to give a big thank you to the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario, who invited me to be part of this very, very special day. I've met so many wonderful people, so many courageous patients, the families, the doctors, the nurses, the medical staff, the advocates, the community volunteers over the past 5 years. And I know that so often you go unrecognized, and you work and you work and you work, and you don't do it to be recognized. But it's nice to see people last Saturday night, like Jenny, recognized at the Sickle Cell Gala. I call you my sickle cell family, and I said to you earlier, my husband is now calling you his sickle cell family. And my husband, when we got back from the gala, my daughters came over for dinner with their families, and he was telling everybody about the wonderful people that he had met on the weekend in Toronto. I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for the work that you do. You are making a difference. You are making a huge difference. Bill S-211 is just the first step. And we heard Marianne speaking earlier today, and I was very touched by her comments, because there is a whole lot left to do. We'll celebrate today, but there is a whole lot left to do. We need newborn screening for all babies. We need, when I was in Nova Scotia, I heard Will Njoku, whose brother, Will, by the way, in Nova Scotia is very well known. He was a star basketball player for St. Mary's University, and he played professional basketball in Europe. But his brother had sickle cell, and at the event in Nova Scotia, he told his story, and he talked about what it was like coming home when you have a sick child in the family, a sick brother, and going into the house and never quite sure what it was going to be like. But he also talked about something that stuck in my mind. He also talked about his brother going to the hospital, and most times that he would go, he would be waiting hours and hours and hours to get treatment. And by the time he actually got it, what they were giving him was just not enough. If he had been treated within the first hour, within the first 15 minutes, it would have made such a difference. And I'm hearing that in Nova Scotia, they're actually starting to give cards to take to outpatients to say that I am a sickle cell patient, so that you can get treated immediately. And I heard somebody speaking about that yesterday in Ottawa, a doctor, and that would be another huge step. There are lots of things to be done. So Rugi, we can continue to work on the next step. I thank you all so much for all that you are doing. It is a privilege to know each and every one of you.
We're so grateful for the support for people in elected office at all levels of government, because we need their support. And just as we had Senator Cordy speaking about her efforts at the national level, we're very privileged to have Councillor James Pasternak represent the municipal perspective here, and I'm looking forward to hearing a few brief remarks from Councillor Pasternak.
Well, thank you very much for this lovely invitation, and congratulations to all of you for the wonderful work that you're doing. On behalf of Mayor John Tory and my colleagues at City Council, I can only wish you well and congratulations on Sickle Cell Illness Awareness Day. I believe it was a couple of years ago where I got an email and a call from the leadership of your group, and I must admit, I really didn't know much about it. And I believe the first meeting had to be rescheduled because of a snowstorm, and it was very brave of you to come down to Toronto from Barrie in a snowstorm. But I was determined to have this meeting to learn as much as I could about this important chronic disease or medical issue. And we met, and a package was handed over, and then we proceeded to support it as best we can at the municipal level. I should mention in passing, Councillor Jim Karagianis, who's a big supporter of the cause, was here a few minutes ago. He had to leave. And Councillor Michael Thompson was also here a couple of minutes ago he had to leave as well. But I can see you are making great strides in education, in awareness, in care and compassion, and that is the way diseases are given the funding they need, making awareness within the medical profession, educating elected officials and people in leadership so that the conversation creates a buzz, so that it's no longer a mystery, it's no longer what is sickle cell, it is a knowledge base. And when you get that knowledge base, when you start to get people involved and understand what it's all about, then you raise funds for research. Elected officials who make decisions on where to put monies into various research are aware of it, and it gets right onto the agenda. So the numbers across the country sound small, but our value system here in Canada, in Toronto and Canada, is never kicked the ladder down from behind us. It doesn't matter how small the numbers may be. We are a caring and compassionate society. We have a single-payer healthcare system, and all chronic diseases, all patients in need should be treated equally. And we must make sure that our provincial and federal colleagues understand that. From what I've heard today, they certainly do. So you can always count on the City of Toronto to play host to this wonderful event every year. I'm sorry I missed the flag raising. I was required to keep quorum at Executive Committee, but certainly next year I will certainly do my best to make it. And I think this gathering and the great cause that you've embraced affirms the truism that God's work in this world must truly be our own. So thank you so much for this invitation. I look forward to hearing from you.
Councillor Pasternak. So our next speaker will be the current chair of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada, Ms. Jenny Gums.
Thank you, Dr. Pendergrass. Ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant good afternoon to you all. I want to salute the patients and the families of those afflicted with that chronic illness that is now known as sickle cell disease. I know Senator Cody had to leave because she said she had a 5 o'clock flight, so I'm extending apologies on her behalf. And also the Consul General of Grenada, he said he got a call that he had to leave, so he has also asked to convey his apologies in terms of his absence. The genesis of my involvement with the Sickle Cell Association, back then, what was it called, Lannery? It was just before it was called Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. Seed of Life. And I loved that name so much. And the person behind it, Lannery, was such an engine, such a vehicle of knowledge. And as a former Consul General of Grenada, I was always empowered by being involved with this organization, meeting patients, meeting families, and trying to positively impact any way that I can. Now I know today we are celebrating the launch of the most memorable and remarkable day, National Sickle Cell Day in Canada. But we are standing on the shoulders of so many people who have fought before, so many warriors. And there's no way we can actually mention all the names. Some of the names were already mentioned before, but I'm sorry, there are some persons I really do have to repeat names, such as Honorable Jean Augustine, who has always been there, always been a champion of the cause. I see Rosemary Sadlier here. She's the former president of the Ontario Black History Society. I know you have been on the Hill several times for advocacy as well. I want to salute you and say thank you for all of the work that you have done and that you continue to do. Of course, Dr. Susanna Ali, she's here staying in the background, trying to stay under the radar, but she herself is also a powerhouse and continue to do so much work for the sickle cell community. We have Taibu. I know we had a representative here in the form of the Ulysses, and also I met a young lady, Serena Thompson, who was with the Sickle Cell Association of Ontario. There are so many people that are in that vehicle transporting the message, bringing awareness of the sickle cell disease, its impact, and how we can help. And they're all joined with this package of awesomeness. I mean, I was reminded I said that, and you know what, it sounds good. Lanre and all the work that you do with your team. Now, we had Honorable Kirsty Duncan, who is now a minister, who has always been there, Senator Cody, Darren Fisher, who was at that event yesterday. The Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada had an event in Ottawa, the eve of the National Sickle Cell Day, which was tremendous. I mean, it was so heartwarming, it was so reassuring to see so many members of parliament, so many leaders who in fact are acting as servants in helping our community, in providing support, in bringing awareness of this disease. What kind of legacy do we want to leave? What should we aspire to be? I always think we should aspire to impact, positively impact. And you know what? Someone said yesterday, you know what? We are celebrating and we are recognizing the first Sickle Cell Day in Canada. That is recognized as a national day for Canada. But in effect, what we are doing is saving lives. And I really liked to hear that. We are celebrating the launch of National Sickle Cell Day, but we are actually saving lives. So let that be our legacy, to inspire others, to support, to assist, to bring awareness. And we do have such an amazing team that's currently involved in it, in the person of Bieber, who is the president of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada, doing outstanding work. Mr. Bowden Macaulay, who has been a chair of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada and who has been involved in the movement even before that and continues to be so. So we do have to salute all of these champions. Dr. Odami, I've heard so much about you, and every time you hear about sickle cell, you hear about Dr. Odami, you hear about Dr. John Adams. So there are so many persons that we can emulate for their involvement, for their support. But you know what? Let us inspire them. We were inspired by them, so we can now aspire to inspire other persons to join the fight. So ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada, I wanted to say to you today, we want to continue in our vision to bring awareness, to bring support, to bring assistance to the community of the sickle cell disease, patients and family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And before we introduce our next speaker, I think it's worth acknowledging that while in Canada, sickle cell disease is still considered to be a relatively rare condition affecting a relatively small number of people, although that's changing. From an international perspective, sickle cell disease is the most common monogenetic disease in the world. It's actually not rare at all. It's very, very common. And what we need to do now to really move forward in raising awareness and in uniting our efforts to battle this condition and come up with effective therapies is we need to create networks and alliances and shared collaborative efforts to tackle sickle cell disease. And we are very privileged, therefore, to have Dr. Isaac Adame here today as the chair of the Global Sickle Cell Network and also as the division head of hematology at the University of Toronto. Dr. Adame.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I stand here on behalf of the Global Sickle Cell Disease Network because, as Dr. Pendergrass said, sickle cell disease is a global disease. In sub-Saharan Africa, 1 out of every 50 babies born has sickle cell disease. Worldwide, we think every day over 1,000 babies are born with sickle cell disease. The tragedy is that their parents will not know that they have sickle cell disease. and nearly half to 80% of them will be dead by the age of 5 years. So the scale of the problem is huge. And progress made in places like Canada rubs on other countries that are struggling to find early diagnosis and treatment. So what we're doing as a global network is to bring awareness of sickle cell disease at a global level. And we are proposing that the same strategy that was adopted by a multi-stakeholder engagement to tackle HIV should be adopted for sickle cell disease as well. So that it doesn't matter where the child is born, it doesn't matter where they live, they should have access to early diagnosis, they should have access to early treatment. So we have to make progress here in Canada, and we have to make it fast. Now that we have Sickle Cell Awareness Day, the journey has only just begun. Because we have to make sure that what we already know can happen for the patient, whether they go to Barrie, or whether they go to Windsor, or whether they are in Nunavut. They should be able to have access to the same standard of treatment. I will let you know that in Ontario, we've developed standard of care for sickle cell disease that was adopted by the previous Ontario government. It's called the Clinical Handbook for Sickle Cell Disease. It's on the Ministry of Health website. We don't need new ideas, we know them. What we now need is to make sure that it happens for every child and adult at the time they need it. So as advocates, you have the power to make it happen, to demand that where you live, when you take your child receive the same standard of treatment as they will receive when they are sick kids. And this is the way we can make progress. And I want to trust that with this day enacted as a bill, the wind is behind us and we can make a difference. I have to tell you that we are living in better times for sickle cell disease. Certainly, at least 6 or 7 different new drugs are being tried for sickle cell disease, some of which have great potential to transform this. Not only that, curative therapies, even for those who don't have families or children who have a match to be able to do transplant, is going to become available. But before we get there, let me leave one message. When you live here and you know somebody who has sickle cell disease, ask them, are you on hydroxyurea therapy? The reason why I say so, it costs less than $1 a day, and it's taken by mouth once a day. And it makes a huge difference to quality of life and survival. But tragically, only few patients take it and take it consistently. Friends, if we can't make hydroxyurea work, nothing else will work better. So I leave you one task. If you know a friend, you know a family, you know a cousin, whether they live here or they live in Jamaica or Nigeria, ask them, have you talked to your doctor about hydroxyurea therapy? Thank you.
And I think, again, we should just pause and reflect upon the significance of today. This being the first, what will without doubt be many, many, many days to come, in the years to come, when we recognize National Sickle Cell Disease Day in Canada. And what that really represents is not simply that we are drawing together as a community here in Toronto, in Ontario, and in Canada. It also means that we put a beacon up in the world to say that we are officially recognizing the importance of this condition, and we are looking for partners around the world to join us in battling it.
Well, thank you everyone. And I want to thank you because it's a long day and you stay till the end, so we really appreciate that. Before I give the closing remarks, I just want to recognize the presence of Gina from Apotex. Thank you for being here, Gina. I mean, it's amazing. We got Novartis, Pfizer, our performer here today. Thank you for being such amazing partners with us. We really appreciate that. I also want to recognize Mr. John Adams. Anyways, Mr. John Adams is the chair of the SCAGO's Advisory Board of Directors, and we thank him for being here. I'd like to thank SCAGO's management team. Honestly, all this work is because of them. They did this work. So Ms. Moji Ogunsoye, our CFO, We have Dr. Susanna Halley, Ms. Doreen Alexander. We have our board members here, Mr. Ricardo Peguro, Ms. Tanya Williams, who's our president. I mean, all of our board members, we really thank you so much for being here and for making today possible. As Senator Curtis said, and as Ms. Jenny said, this day wouldn't be possible without the volunteers. They did the work, and we thank you, for making sure that today happened. As advocates, as community partners, as medical partners, Dr. Odami, Dr. Pendergrass, Dr. Ward, all of the people who are here today, we thank you because together we got this day to pass, and together we can push forward to make bigger things happen. As Dr. Odami mentioned, there is the guidelines. This guidelines is actually also on SCAGO's website. If you want to see it, you can go under guidelines, under healthcare, and you can look at these guidelines. They did the work. The expert panel put together the guidelines to guide care and treatment in this province. We are asking the Ministry of Health to implement these guidelines. And then, anyways, we are still talking on this, but I know that this is the way we need to move forward. We need to get these guidelines. Every hospital that you go to, no matter where you live, you should be able to get the same standard of care, the same treatment. Like Dr. Odami said, if you live in Sudbury or you live, it doesn't matter. Currently, it's not so, but we have to make it happen. So Bill 211, the National Day, is going to open the door to these bigger happenings whereby no matter where you are, you will get the same treatment. But we must work together. See, we can't do it alone. Without you, we can't do it. So work with us. Let's work together and push forward advocacy to a new level in this province and in our country. On this note, I want to thank you again, and I want to ask you to please keep on sharing the Get Tested message. Ask your friends, your colleagues, ask people. Even you can go on the road. I mean, I do that and say, hello, hi, how are you? Have you been tested for sickle cell? Then the question will be, what is sickle cell? Opportunity to educate. Use any opportunity that you have. Educate people about sickle cell disease. Let's get the words out there. Let's talk about it. If you're on Twitter, hashtag sickle cell awareness, hashtag sickle cell, June 19. Let's get the awareness going. I want to thank you again. I appreciate you for being here, and we look forward to celebrating next year with you. Thank you.